Senior Lieutenant Dmitry Lavrinenko didn't have a moment to lose. It was November 18th, 1941, and the Soviet tank ace had just received word the Germans were quickly surrounding them. A sizable panzer column was bringing up the rear. Hitler's Wehrmacht was rapidly advancing on Moscow, and every decision would count if the Red Army were to have any hope of defending their capital. Only one thing could work: a surprise ambush on the enemy. Lavrinenko had already used the strategy several times in previous battles to devastating effect. But as he cautiously maneuvered his T-34 to intercept the German tank column en route to the captured village of Shishkin, he soon realized that this time he would have his work cut out for him. The barren highway was completely devoid of any natural cover. He would have to pray his tank's white paint would save him from detection against the bleak, snowy landscape. Lavrinenko and his crew waited in nervous anticipation. Soon enough, the first German tanks began to roll into view, an imposing procession of daunting steel monsters. Lavrinenko counted them as they appeared. There were 18 of their tanks, against just his one. The odds were stacked heavily against him, but there was no time to dwell on the disparities. With the first panzer in the T-34's sights, it was time for the battle to commence. Dmitry Fedorovich Lavrinenko was born for battle. On September 10, 1914, he entered the world in Bestrashnaya, a village in Kuban whose name means fearless. Though poor, his family belonged to the legendary Cossacks, renowned as the Russian Empire's toughest soldiers. After brief stints as a teacher, statistician, and bank cashier, he voluntarily joined the Red Army in 1934 at age 20, initially serving in cavalry before transferring to tank school in Ulyanovsk. Graduating as a junior lieutenant in 1938, Lavrinenko soon saw action. He participated in the 1939 Soviet invasion of Poland and the 1940 occupation of Bessarabia. When Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, Lavrinenko commanded a tank platoon in western Ukraine, now on the front lines of what the Russians called the Great Patriotic War. As the Wehrmacht overwhelmed Soviet forces, Lavrinenko's unit retreated. It was during this chaotic withdrawal that he first distinguished himself. While others destroyed damaged tanks to speed the retreat, Lavrinenko insisted on driving his battered vehicle eastward for repairs. His obstinance irked his superiors, but demonstrated the determination that would soon make him famous on the battlefield. Over the summer of 1941, the Wehrmacht continued its push toward Moscow as the Red Army prepared for a bitter defense of the Soviet capital. In early October, approaching the town of Tsensk, around 190 miles south of Moscow, Henry Lobert's Heinz-Guderian's 2nd Panzer Group was met by Colonel Mikhail Kotukov's 4th Tank Brigade, to which Dmitry Lavrinenko had been reassigned. The 4th Tank Brigade was equipped with the new T-34 tanks, which had been introduced the previous year. With 60-degree sloped armor that offered robust protection against anti-tank weapons, and a powerful 3-inch tank gun capable of destroying a wide range of enemy targets, the T-34 would prove to be a formidable force on the battlefield of World War II's Eastern Front, and none more so than in the hands of Dmitry Lavrinenko. On October 6th, near the village of Pervivoin, Lavrinenko and his platoon of 4 T-34 tanks targeted a German tank column that had trapped a motorized rifle battalion in a ravine, launching an assault just as the enemy began firing on the infantry with machine guns and menacing them with their tracks. Maintaining a strategic distance, Lavrinenko's T-34s commenced firing on the German tanks, skillfully shifting their positions to create the illusion of a much larger force. This tactical maneuver bewildered the Germans, making them believe they were facing a far more substantial tank group. During this intense engagement, Lavrinenko's crew took down 4 German tanks. Senior Sergeant Antonov's crew was particularly effective, eliminating 7 tanks and 2 anti-tank guns. Sergeant Kapatov's crew contributed by knocking out 1 tank, while Junior Lieutenant Polyansky's crew dispatched 3 tanks and 4 motorcycles. Remarkably, Lavrinenko's platoon emerged unscathed from the skirmish. Their timely and well-coordinated attack not only decimated the enemy, but also ensured the survival of the beleaguered motorized rifle battalion. 3 days later, Lavrinenko and his crew came up against the Wehrmacht again, but this time they would have to face the enemy alone. 10 German tanks suddenly appeared on the outskirts of the village of Sheno. But keeping a cool head and remembering the strategies that had proven so successful in the previous skirmish, he again applied a series of well-executed ambushes and position changes to confuse the German tank units. Just as before, the tactic worked to great effect, destroying one enemy tank and causing the others to retreat. By October 11th, Lavrinenko already had 7 tanks, 1 anti-tank gun, and up to 2 platoons of German infantry under his belt, and was quickly gaining a reputation as a tenacious commander. A few days later, the 4th Tank Brigade was transferred to Volokholamsk, around 80 miles northwest of Moscow. However, stopping at the 50th Army Command headquarters along the way, Lavrinenko's T-34 was asked by the senior officers there to stay behind to help guard the base for a short time, though Lavrinenko and his crew, driver and mechanic Senior Sergeant Betny, gunner and radio operator Sergeant Borzhik, and loader Private Pedetov, were only kept behind briefly as they tried to leave to catch up with the rest of the brigade. They found the road to be heavily congested, the traffic preventing them from reaching their comrades, who were now far ahead. Having already resigned themselves to a late arrival, the 4 men stopped at a barbershop in the city of Serpukhov to get a shave. No sooner had Lavrinenko settled into his chair than an out-of-breath Red Army soldier burst into the room, urging him to immediately meet with the city commandant, Brigade Commander Firsov. Rushing to see what Firsov needed, Lavrinenko was briefed on an urgent situation. A German battalion-sized column was advancing along the highway from Malaya Roslovets to Serpukhov, and no troops were available to defend the city. Reinforcements were expected at any moment, but until their arrival, all hopes rested on Lavrinenko's lone tank. Lavrinenko positioned his T-34 for an ambush in a grove near Vysokniki, with a clear view of the road stretching in both directions. Luckily for Lavrinenko, the overconfident Germans neglected to scout ahead. Soon enough, the enemy column came into view, led by rattling motorcycles, followed by a staff car, 3 trucks carrying infantry, and various anti-tank guns. Allowing the column to close in to around 150 yards, Lavrinenko took a point-blank shot, instantly destroying 2 enemy anti-tank guns. As the German artillerymen scrambled to maneuver the third, Lavrinenko's tank surged onto the highway, ramming into the infantry-laden trucks and crushing the last gun under its tracks. The surviving German troops, disoriented from the surprise attack, were soon taken care of by the Soviet infantry units, who arrived on the scene moments later. As a result of the ambush, Lavrinenko's crew secured 13 machine guns, 6 mortars, 10 motorcycles with sidecars, and an anti-tank gun, all fully stocked with ammunition, which they handed over to Commander Firsov. In recognition of their efforts, Firsov allowed the crew to claim the staff car, which was found to contain vital documents and maps that were later sent to Moscow for analysis. Meanwhile, Colonel Katakov had heard nothing of Lavrinenko's whereabouts since he had left him at the 50th Army Command headquarters 4 days previously, and now the head of the unit's political department, Senior Battalion Commissar I.G. Devryankin, was becoming seriously concerned about the effect of the missing T-34 on the troops' morale. The 2 officers began frantically calling everywhere they could to see if anyone had any idea as to where Lavrinenko or his crew might be, but to no avail. Just past noon on October 20th, a T-34 tank approached the brigade headquarters, its treads rattling, closely followed by a German staff car. The tank's turret hatch swung open, and Lavrinenko emerged nonchalantly, followed by Sergeant Borzhik and Private Fedotov, while Senior Sergeant Betny sat at the wheel of the staff car. The head of the political department, Devryankin, visibly furious, confronted Lavrinenko, demanding to know why the lieutenant and his crew had vanished without a trace. Lavrinenko simply reached into the breast pocket of his tunic, pulled out a document, and handed it to Devryankin. It read, quote, "To Colonel Comrade Katakov, the commander of the vehicle, Dmitry Fedorovich Lavrinenko, was detained by me. He was tasked with stopping the enemy who had broken through and helping to restore the situation at the front and in the area of the city of Serpukhov. He not only completed this task with honor, but also showed himself to be a hero. For the exemplary performance of this combat mission, the Military Council of the Army announced gratitude to the entire crew and nominated them for a government award. Commandant of the city of Serpukhov, Brigade Commander Firsov." On November 17th, recently promoted to senior lieutenant, Lavrinenko found himself near the town of Lishchevo, leading a formation comprising 3 BT-7 tanks and 3 T-34s into a fierce engagement with a much larger force of 18 German panzers. Despite being considerably outnumbered, Lavrinenko's unit managed to destroy 7 of the enemy tanks, though 2 of the Soviet BT-7s were set on fire, and 2 of the T-34s also received damage. Lavrinenko's own tank emerged unscathed from the encounter, and having seen off the German panzers, he was successfully able to lead his men in taking control of Lishchevo, which was subsequently secured by a rifle regiment. However, there was no time to celebrate. The nearby town of Shishkin had fallen to the Germans, and the Wehrmacht was now breaking through, on the right flank of General Ivan Panfilov's 8th Guards Rifle Division, known as the 316th Rifles, until the day before. This could have led to several units of the division becoming surrounded and isolated, a potential disaster for the Red Army. To make matters worse, an enemy tank column was now quickly advancing behind the division's lines. Staging an ambush, Lavrinenko positioned his T-34 near the road to Shishkin in preparation for taking on the enemy armored unit single-handedly, with only the tank's white paint for camouflage. He might have been outnumbered, but he refused to be outsmarted. As the 18-strong German panzer column appeared on the highway, he targeted the flanks of the leading tanks before quickly shifting his fire to the rear ones, then unleashing a barrage into the center of the column without giving the enemy a chance to react. This masterful tactic enabled his crew to destroy 6 German tanks while avoiding damage to their T-34 before slipping away unnoticed. The next day, Lavrinenko was in the village of Gusenevo, where General Panfilov was briefing a group of journalists about his division's name change. Suddenly, they were hit by an enemy mortar attack, a shell splinter claiming the general's life. Lavrinenko had no time to grieve. 8 German panzers were rolling down the highway toward the village, preparing to annihilate the Soviet forces within. He and his crew frantically scrambled into their positions in their T-34 and sped toward the enemy at full throttle. Getting within a few yards of the German column, the Soviet tanks swerved sharply to the side and halted before opening fire at point-blank range. The first round obliterated the lead German tank, halting the others in their tracks. The panzers were now sitting ducks for Lavrinenko and his crew, who now had time to aim and fire with lethal precision, destroying 7 tanks with just as many shells. However, just as they prepared to take out the 8th and final German tank, the gun's trigger jammed, leaving the panzer free to escape. Moments later, another 10 enemy tanks rolled into sight. Before Lavrinenko could react, a German shell came crashing through the T-34's armor with devastating impact. Driver-mechanic Bedny lost his life instantly, while radio operator gunner Sharov was critically injured by shrapnel. Determined to save him, Lavrinenko and loader Fedotov managed to extract Sharov through the turret hatch, but he succumbed to his wounds moments later. Ammunition inside the tank began to explode, engulfing the vehicle in flames and rendering it impossible to retrieve Bedny's body. Lavrinenko was infuriated by the loss of his crew members, but his valiant actions on the battlefield had not gone unnoticed. On December 5th, now boasting a tally of 47 victories against German tanks, he was nominated for the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. On December 18th, he was leading an advanced detachment in the Gryada area. Approaching the German-held village of Pokrovskoye, instead of waiting for the main forces to arrive, he decided to launch a surprise attack. After destroying the enemy garrison there, Lavrinenko pushed on toward the nearby village of Goryuni. Meanwhile, the Germans, carefully tracking his movements, attempted to lay a trap. By allowing Lavrinenko to go ahead, they would then approach from the rear with a group of 10 tanks and several anti-tank guns to cut the advanced detachment off from the main Soviet forces. However, the Germans' plan drastically backfired. Lavrinenko soon realized what was happening and turned his unit around at the same time as Colonel Kadakov was arriving with the rest of the brigade. The Germans were now the ones caught in the pincers and were now helpless to defend themselves against the Red Army. In the ensuing battle, Lavrinenko himself claimed his 52nd German tank, as well as 2 anti-tank guns and up to 50 German soldiers. With their armored units wiped out, the Wehrmacht began laying down heavy mortar fire on Goryuni. It was time for the Soviets to move on. Lavrinenko was summoned by Colonel Chernoyarov, commander of the 17th Tank Brigade, to establish their plan going forward. Leaving his tank, he began walking across the snow to meet the colonel. Yet just at that moment, Lavrinenko was struck by a fragment of an incoming mortar shell, instantly cutting short the life of the Red Army's most rapidly rising star. Incredibly, in just 2.5 months, Dmitry Lavrinenko had managed to eliminate 52 German tanks, making him the highest-scoring Allied tank ace of World War II. For reasons unknown, he was initially denied the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. Instead, 4 days after his demise, he was posthumously given the less prestigious Order of Lenin. However, in 1990, this oversight was corrected, and he finally received the official hero status, the highest in the USSR's honor system.